Hello friends, welcome back to True Love Stories Hub. I'm no longer monetized by YouTube, so if you like my content and want to support me, please check out my Patreon. Thank you so much for being a regular viewer of the channel. What is the deepest, darkest secret you found out about a friend that really messed up with your head? I had a friend who I hung out with all through high school and most of college. He wasn't all that creepy, more annoying. Though on more than one occasion he tried to discuss moral gray areas with me, I always shut those conversations down. Sophomore year of college, I get a Facebook message from a girl who I butted heads on within high school. She was also friends with this guy and told me to watch my back. She was house-sitting for him while he was away, and she was using his computer. She found a hard drive full of photos of herself and many other women in our acquaintance. Many were taken through bedroom windows. Others were taken at parties after the girls had passed out. I was not among them, but she said he hadn't stopped talking about me lately. I had a class with him, and he would not be avoided, so I confronted him. He admitted everything. I never spoke to him again. I still get chills when I think about how often he tried to get me to smoke or drink with him alone. Story 2. A colleague I'd been friendly with for 5+ years faked having cancer, shaved head, gaunt makeup, even a cane. I'd always bring her meals, wear the solidarity ribbon, offer to cover for her if she wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. Finally, one of the other faculty members informed me it was all a ruse. They all knew and had stopped feeding it years ago, but whenever they confronted her about it, she denied it. Story 3. I went to visit my best friend at the time after we hadn't seen each other for a while. I asked about her smaller dog who wasn't at the house anymore. Backstory about this dog: he was bought as a puppy, and when his owner was going through a divorce, he put the dog in a basement. The only interactions he had with people were abusive, so over time he became aggressive toward people. The original owner was going to put him down, and my friend decided to rescue and rehabilitate him. She had him for a couple of years, and when I went to see her, he wasn't there anymore. When I asked what happened, she said she got angry that he peed on the carpet, drove him to a dirt road by the airport, and left him there. She laughed when she told me that he ran after the car, in a way where you could tell she expected me to find it funny too. I was livid, shaking. I left and never spoke to her again. I don't know if that counts exactly, but it messed with my head and still does. Story 4. A friend of mine who I have known for probably 15 years dropped a doozy on his circle of friends. He was a perfectly normal dude. He was a little shy and quietly grew up, but he did well in school. He loved sports and always came to hang out whenever the group went somewhere. Then he got arrested for videotaping dudes using the urinals at the college he had recently graduated from. Everyone, from all his friends to his siblings to his parents, was shocked that such a mild-mannered, normal dude would do that and never even drop a hint. He ended up getting put on house arrest for a year. I visited a few times, tried to be supportive and see him through all of this, but shame seems to have gotten the best of him. He doesn't respond to calls or texts and has just kind of faded away. I've lost touch with him, but his dad is a family friend, so I know he's alive and well. He grew up in a conservative household, and I feel like he just grew up so quiet, because his true self was being repressed. Maybe he has always been gay and has been too ashamed to come out. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Who knows? All I know is, either way I'd love him all the same, and I wish he would get in touch. Story 5. My childhood best friend's mom was Miss Perfect. Always had the best snacks made for playdates. House was perfectly neat, hair perfectly combed. She was everyone's softball coach, Girl Scout leader, class mom, everything. My mom said when she used to see her when picking us kids up from school, her breath always smelt perfectly minty fresh, like she was so perfect. I am in college now and recently attended her funeral. She was a raging alcoholic. Her breath always smelt minty fresh from mouthwash to cover up the stench of her drink. She literally offed herself with alcohol. So sad. Literally what seemed like the perfect woman was offing herself over the span of 10 years. I have no idea what she was going through to this day. May she rest in peace. Story 6. Not really a very dark secret, but I had a friend that had many friends outside of school. People would always call him and ask him to hang out every day. Turns out he had an app that would fake call you with the names you put in. He would have actual conversations on the phone, with no one on the other side, obviously. He felt that having no friends or girlfriends outside of school was embarrassing. Story 7. This girl I met in high school was on the same rugby team as me. Ever since the spring season started, she began showing up to practice less and less frequently. The coaches always told us to stop asking about her, and never said anything about her not showing up, while giving others criticism for skipping or slacking off. Fast forward to our quarterfinal tournament a couple of weeks later, and she finally showed up. Except she was crying. She was still determined to play though, and played aggressively well against the other teams. I found out afterward that she had been living in a physically abusive household and had finally been emancipated that week. Throughout the 2 years I had known her, she never gave any indication of anything like that, and as far as I know, no one else knew what was happening either. It came as a complete surprise to me and really opened my eyes, as it made me wonder for the first time if anyone else I knew might be experiencing something similar at home. Story 8. One of the funniest, most enjoyable guys to be around in high school had a paraplegic brother who was slowly dying throughout our time together. Only found out after we graduated and lost contact that he even had a brother and that he had died a few nights before prom. Really put a different perspective on all the memories we had together and the fun times we had, all the while he was quietly dealing with this by himself. It really hit me hard when I found out. Story 9. I worked at a coffee shop with a woman who was considerably older than myself. She's the most lovely, kind-hearted, and friendly person I've met, and she was sort of a motherly figure to me. I don't know how this came up in conversation, but one day she told me she cheats on her husband with her ex-husband every chance she gets. I just don't know how to feel about that. Story 10. This was years ago, but I learned from another classmate that my friend's parents were intentionally starving her for some reason we didn't know at the time. She was naturally tiny, so I didn't realize at first, but then her behavior started to change, and I knew she wasn't being treated right. After a while, her younger sister told us that their parents wanted her to be skinny at 12 friggin' years old to look beautiful for an older man they had arranged to be her husband. I don't really know what became of it since I'm no longer in contact with any of my primary school friends, but I can only hope she's doing well and that her sister didn't have to follow in her footsteps. Story 11. University in my halls of residence. I made friends with a guy who was into heavy metal music. He was quite different from me. I was sporty, involved in the university football team, etc. He was big into pot and metal music, but I talked to anyone, and if you're not a jerk, I don't care how you dress or what music you like. He had come from the other side of the country, and I could tell he felt quite lonely and was just getting by financially. So I used to invite him into my room with other friends, and it would always end up with just me and him talking about conspiracy theories and all sorts of things, until the early hours. When we went out, I would drag him along and slip about 20 into his pocket saying, "When you make it big," he was a musician. I started a cook-off with him in the halls, since he wasn't sure how to cook, so I gave him a few recipes and he ran with it. He was a great guy. We liked totally different things, but at the same time, we connected. Anyway, one of those nights, I forced him to come out because he was looking homesick in his room. He was drunk, and we were walking home when he put his arm around me and said, "You know, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here right now." Thinking he meant being out and drunk, I said, "I know you were tough to persuade to come out." He responded, "No, not this. I mean, you've saved me so many times, and you don't know it." Confused, I asked what he meant. "Dude, I'm so unhappy here. I've thought about hurt myself, and at times I almost went through with it, only for you to come in and start talking to me, or you forced me to come out. I never wanted to be here. My parents forced me, and I just wanted to end it all." I was drunk and a bit in shock. I told him he should never end things over being somewhere he didn't want to be or doing something he didn't want to do. I said he could change that by dropping out and doing something he really wanted. No one would see him as a failure, but as someone brave enough to go against the flow and chase what he wanted. I remember him looking straight at me. He smiled and nodded, then motioned to the takeaway and asked if I wanted anything he was buying. Then he laughed and said, "Well, you are. It's your money." A few weeks later, we broke up for Christmas, and we all went back home for the holidays. He called me while he was in the car with a friend, driving back to university to get his stuff because he was leaving. I remember him sounding so relieved. He thanked me for everything. It was only later that I realized the difference I had made, and it messed with my head a little. I started thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't been the way I was, and the effect it could have had on me and his family. I hope you're doing well, Jim, and rocking it. Story 12. My cousin was my best friend. She was a year older than me, loved anime, and would stay up with me to binge-watch Inyas and other girly shows. She and her brother even lived with us for a couple of years after CPS took them from their mom. She said we would always be friends and that our kids would grow up together like we did. It turns out she had been hurting my little sister. I found out last year. My sister begged me not to confront her. When I did, all she said was, "I'm sorry I did that to you, but I can't remember most of it." Looking back, there were so many red flags. My sister trying to switch rooms, and the big personality change she showed after my cousin moved in. All this time, I thought she was just jealous. Now that cousin is pregnant and tells people that my family used to abuse her and that she had to run away to have a better life. She also says she loves her mom so much, even though all her mom did during the 10 years her kids lived with us was give my mom $100 and a box of plastic tableware. Story 13. I had a friend from work who was older than me. We worked on the bar and spent a lot of time together and became good friends. He had a twin brother who he always wanted me to meet. He used to like parties and would often tell stories of mad acid-fueled parties he had been to, and we often went out and had a few wild ones. He was a friendly, upbeat guy but used to change in a second's notice and became unbearably angry and rude. He used to have these mood swings quite regularly, and I started to notice that when he was happy, he would refer to his twin brother as the more serious one, and when he was angry, his brother would be the upbeat and happy one. One Christmas, he brought his family in to show them the restaurant we were working at, and his brother never came or existed. Story 14. I had a close friend in the 8th grade who clearly had an extremely strained relationship with her mother. Constant fighting, defiance, anger, etc. Any semblance of a bond was simply non-existent. I always wondered what was up, but in my youth chalked it up to, well, we all hate our parents. One day, during a phone conversation, I don't know what topic of conversation preceded it, her voice began to crack and she told me, when I was 9 years old, in the summer, my mother told me I was out of control and needed help. She drove me to a hospital, and before dropping me off told me I'll visit you on the weekends. It was a mental hospital, OP. The needles they used on those people when they freaked. I stayed there for a few weeks. My father had to fight to get me out. I don't remember exactly what I said, except that I was so sorry. Mostly I just wanted to hug her until she didn't need to cry anymore. These pop into my head from time to time. We lost touch. I hope life is treating her okay. Story 15. When I was around 8 years old, I met a girl named Molly. Her family had moved that summer to a house a few houses down, and I really didn't see her for the first month or two that summer. My first memory of her was when I was playing with a small anthill in my backyard and she came over and joined me. She showed interest in my anthill, and by 8-year-old logic, she was the coolest person ever, and we became best friends. We would play every day that we could in her backyard or my backyard, go to the pool, ride bikes, ride scooters, and play basketball. Basically, if I went outside, she would be out with me. A few years later, we were still best friends and did everything together. When we were about 12 to 13, I remember it was the late fall of 7th grade, when she didn't show up for a month of school. When she came back, she didn't really tell me why she was gone. She said that she was sick and was taking medication to get better, so I never thought too much about it after. We would still hang out every day, but I started to notice that she wasn't the same. She wasn't as hyper as she always was, like she would have to take breaks more often when we were doing stuff. The summer before 8th grade and 8th grade years, she still seemed normal, but I remember that her mom would call her in to take medication, and she couldn't stay out as long with me anymore. High school started. We went to the same high school but didn't get to hang out as much because I was playing baseball and she started to take up playing the piano. She used to play softball/baseball with me until she said she had to stop playing baseball, so she took up an instrument. Because of our different schedules, we didn't get to see each other too often, and we would once or twice a week, but it felt like we never talked. In the summer after freshman year, we used to hang out every day, but she couldn't go out as much. She would be inside her house more, and I would go over to her place and watch TV, play video games, and she got really good with the piano. So she would play when my family would go over for BBQs. This summer was also the same summer as she was going to the doctors more often. She would always tell me it was just a checkup, and if she didn't give the checkup, she would say she was getting the test done. She would tell me that she was okay, but I knew something wasn't okay. Our families shared a beach house down in South Carolina that we would go to in August of each summer. About the second week of being there, that's when I found out. We would go out to the boardwalk pretty much every morning before it got too hot and just go to the beach, get ice cream cones every day, and do whatever this was the first summer that her dad had to come with us everywhere. And it wasn't really a big deal, neither one of us really minded. But I didn't know why he wanted to come. We were standing in line to get food when I saw her pass out in the middle of ordering food for everyone. I was freaking out while her dad called her mom to meet them back at the house because Molly passed out. So he picked her up. We ran back to the house, which was about 5 minutes away, and just got in their car and started speeding towards the local hospital. Her parents took her to emergency care, and I waited in the waiting room. I called my parents to tell them what happened, and they met me at the hospital. About 6 hours later, I was allowed to see her, and she told me that she was okay and that she must have escaped from the heat and not drank enough water. She was staying at the hospital overnight, so her and my parents took me out to eat and stopped by the house first to get changed and stuff before heading back to the hospital. I had just finished showering and got changed when her mom stopped by my room and told me that she and parents had to talk to me. This was the scariest moment of my life. Her parents had told me that Molly was diagnosed with ALS back in 7th grade and that she wasn't expected to live too much longer. Her condition was getting worse and she might only live for a few more years. I didn't know what ALS was, so they were explaining it to me, and I remember crying for an hour. I went back to the hospital with her parents to check up on her and get her food, and then we went to her room and they told her that they had told me what was happening. She was literally a year or two from death, but she didn't cry or feel sorry for herself. She had just passed out and was smiling and joking about saying she wasn't going to have to do her summer projects and homework at least, and comforting her parents and me. She was the most amazing person I have ever met to be able to be that happy and confident in the face of death. She ended up coming back to school that fell with me, and she told our small circle of friends what might happen to her in the coming year and how she wanted it to be the best year. It was the most bittersweet moment of my life. All my friends and I quit sports and after-school clubs so we could hang out with her every day, and we all just did whatever she wanted. Any place she wanted to go, anything she wanted to do. My parents would even let me sleep over at her house whenever we wanted, and I basically ended up living with her for the entire sophomore year of high school. That was the most fun year of my life, and I won't forget it. That summer, her condition worsened, and on August 17th, she passed away. She was the prettiest, smartest, funniest, most confident, outgoing, energetic, friendliest, and loving person I will ever know. Story 16. That she was a user. She used other people to her advantage, mostly monetarily, but also emotionally. She'd get with guys she knew liked her, and have them buy her expensive things before breaking things off with them. I found out accidentally when she had a little too much to drink one day and gleefully told me what she'd done while talking crap about all those guys, calling them stupid, annoying, etc. We'd been best friends for 2 years at that point, and I had no idea she was even capable of doing such things, because she'd always treated me well. I cut her off completely, and to this day she still emails me occasionally telling me her woe is me stories. To think that I called her my best friend. Story 17. That she was a user. She used other people to her advantage, mostly monetarily but also emotionally. She'd get with guys she knew liked her and have them buy her expensive things before breaking things off with them. I found out accidentally when she had a little too much to drink one day and gleefully told me what she'd done while talking crap about all those guys, calling them stupid, annoying, etc. We'd been best friends for 2 years at that point, and I had no idea she was even capable of doing such things because she'd always treated me well. I cut her off completely, and to this day she still emails me occasionally telling me her woe is me stories. To think that I called her my best friend. Story 18. I met a guy since freshman year of high school, and then we were roommates for 2 years in college. Nicest guy you could ever meet. Turns out he was a major drug trafficker. When he was finally caught, they ended up seizing something like $200,000 worth of cash and prepaid debit cards. The entire time I knew him, I had no idea. He drove a 10-year-old car. We lived in a pretty crappy apartment on the mesh side of town and still took out student loans and had a used car loan. Just blew my mind. Someone so nice and modest could be into something like that. Story 19. I knew a guy since freshman year of high school, and then we were roommates for 2 years in college. Nicest guy you could ever meet. Turns out he was a major drug trafficker. When he was finally caught, they ended up seizing something like $200,000 worth of cash and prepaid debit cards. The entire time I knew him, I had no idea. He drove a 10-year-old car. We lived in a pretty crappy apartment on the mesh side of town and still took out student loans and had a used car loan. Just blew my mind. Someone so nice and modest could be into something like that. Story 20. I was friends with a couple for about a year. We never planned to hang out or anything, but we frequented the same few bars, so I'd see them from time to time and became pretty good friends. Then I started seeing him out by himself a lot more and being increasingly flirty with other women. One night when I overheard him trying to talk a woman into heading to a hotel, his girlfriend lived with him, I messaged his girlfriend on Facebook. I asked if they were still together, and then just simply told her what I'd observed. She thanked me for being a good friend, and then actually showed up about 5 minutes later. They left together quickly, and then I didn't see either of them for a couple months. One night I finally saw the guy out at the bar again, and I expected some hostility. I'd heard from mutual friends that he was pissed, and some other mutual acquaintances had suggested to him that he confront me with physical violence. Fortunately, his better sense prevailed, despite him probably a dozen drinks in already when I showed up that night. Here's a summary of how the conversation went, leaving out irrelevant personal details. I believe we need to talk, pants, and I think you already know what about. Yep, I suppose so. I don't have much to say to you because I mostly can't believe you'd do that to me, so my only question is, why would you do that? Because you're both my friends, and I'd have done the same for you if I'd seen her out and trying to hook up with other guys. Alright, I guess I can see that. I just still can't believe you'd do that to me. Guys are supposed to look out for each other, man. Guys or girls? I look out for my friends, and if see someone getting screwed over and don't say anything, then that means I'm screwing them over too. Okay, I can see where you come from, but just so you know, we're broken up now because of what you did. Come on, man. It wasn't what I did that was the problem there. If I was cheating on my girlfriend, and you told her, I wouldn't be pissed at you for telling the truth. Telling the truth and looking out for someone isn't a bad thing. After he thinks for a minute, it wasn't entirely your fault. You just kind of forced us to confront some issues we were already having. Think some more, so I'm not going to try to start anything with you, and I'll be civil when I see you, but we're not friends anymore. Alright, well, I guess I can understand that. It was a surprisingly civil conversation, given how drunk he was and considering that our mutual friend was also there who piped up a few times to point out that he had advised the guy to beat my A for betraying him. All in all, I found out that a handful of guys who I thought were pretty upstanding had this secret code of helping cover for each other when they cheat. Found out some friends are serial cheaters. Story 21. A few weeks ago, one of my close friends told me that multiple times every day he must make a mental list of reasons not to off himself. As far as I know, he was completely mentally stable. For all I know, he still is. The way he acts is still very relaxed, and he doesn't seem depressed at all. We're also part of a very big group of friends, school band, and he's in a very positive and supporting environment, so I'm not super worried about him, but it's still something I think about. Edit. My friend said this in the middle of a conversation where we were all joking and laughing, which doesn't at all lessen the gravity of what he said, but he wasn't telling me this in the middle of an existential crisis or breakdown. Also, he followed up by saying the list was very long currently. Immediately after he said that everyone else in the conversation, including me, insisted, he got some help, and he continuously dismissed it, saying he was fine. My friend is also someone who is very jokingly nihilistic and introspective, and knowing him, he would be able to diagnose if the problem was very serious and reach out for professional help. He's also very open about his life and would tell multiple people before he snapped. Another thing to note is that he's told me multiple times about his career plans after high school, and he has many contingency plans in case things go wrong, which tells me he has plans to stick around for a while. Thank you all for your concern. Just know that he should be fine for quite a while. Story 22. I used to work with this guy who in secret was some kind of online investigator for hire. The dude never really wanted to hang out outside of work, but after a little joking around I got him open. He showed me his little workstation he used. He would tell me the kinds of stuff he found and how easy it was for him to get the information. It made me worried about my own security, although the guy was nice and I honestly believe he was a good person nonetheless, but hearing some of the stories really gave me chills. Story 23. While this isn't a secret, my friend rarely talks about it much. He used to be homeless, and occasionally he'll say a couple things about it. One day we got on the topic of the rapid rate gentrification and the observable signs of it in our city, and he said that he observed that the howl was gone. He said that when he was homeless and would sleep on the streets at night, he'd hear this collective howl of the other homeless people, a howl of having absolutely nothing in the world, and the feeling that there was absolutely nothing to do about it. He said he used to hear it when he was out late at night, but as of recently it was gone. I still don't know what is more terrifying, the howl or the sudden lack of it. Story 24. The first time that I learned that my roommate was a cybercriminal was when I answered my door in my bathrobe and Special Agent Henderson handed me a warrant to search my apartment. This was in the early 2000s, so having high-speed internet and a home Ethernet was a little ahead of the curve. But he was a gamer like me, so when I moved in, I just thought I was lucky that my roommate had a sweet internet connection. Turns out he was part of an identity theft ring that infiltrated financial companies. You know how they say most hacks are socially engineered rather than technical? Apparently that also makes those cybercrimes easier to prosecute since the perpetrators leave behind a paper trail of their communications as they are conspiring to commit crimes. My roommate was trying to use me as a fall guy and was routing traffic through my computer and writing enough data to my hard drive to implicate me. When the investigators knocked on the door, they still didn't know which one of us was the one behind the keyboard and the extent to which each of us were in on it. My roommate used multiple screen names. They expected the computer forensics to shed light on it, and the evidence on my computer was obvious compared to the lengths they eventually had to go to find stuff on his. So I was super lucky that they had initially focused on communications evidence to build their conspiracy case. But at first, they thought I was involved. They compared my chat logs to his to see whose vocabulary and typing speed matched the evidence, but that wasn't enough to exonerate me given the forensics. They kept hammering me for alibi whenever I tried to get them to believe that I knew nothing about it. He had been careful to stay active when I was home, often asleep, so I couldn't use real-life friends to testify that I was with them at the times that he was online. Even my emails and stuff I sent at the same time he was active didn't take up enough time to prove I hadn't just done both things at once. I had the bright idea of using my image activity as an alibi, which the investigators were super skeptical of. But to their credit, they were patient and wanted to use our testimony to build a strong case on the correct person, rather than just toss someone in jail. I had messages from guildmates about raids and congratulating me on leveling up my Dark Ages of Camelot character. I had a few instances of this happen at the same time. My roommate was communicating with his accomplices. It was the first time I was able to get investigators to shift their focus to him since they found evidence on my computer from his tampering. After that, they were more inclined to listen to my side of the story and be skeptical of his. As they dug deeper and time went on though, more signs started to point to him. Eventually, he slipped up in an interview and revealed something he couldn't otherwise know about, They reversed it in me and fed me a false narrative of events that I believed since I didn't know what he had done, which helped them realize just how uninformed I was. In trying to clear my name, I made stupid assumptions about how hacking worked. I imagined he was the online equivalent of a bank robber, and never said anything about overseas financial services companies, so it got kind of obvious I wasn't some criminal mastermind. In the end, there wasn't much testimony I could provide, but I was the only witness that he was at the computer, at the scene of the crime. The other witnesses were experts interpreting the evidence rather than testifying against him. So it got kind of intense being cross-examined and accused of being involved in something I first found out about standing in my bathrobe with my Cheerios getting soggy on the counter behind me. My cool gamer roommate was a cybercriminal framing me to cover his tracks, and I had to plead with cops and testify against him after I found out to avoid jail time. Story 25. My friend got a divorce and was living in an apartment by himself. I needed a roommate, so I packed up and moved in. I knew he had lost a child in his crib a year prior. One night we were drinking, and he started saying he was a piece of crap and deserved to die. I knew what he was referring to, so I grabbed him by the shoulder and told him, "Dude, there was nothing you could have done." He then broke down and told me what happened. He was playing WoW and the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he covered his mouth until he stopped screaming. The child was only 6 months old. He thought the baby had just fallen asleep, so he went back to playing. About half an hour later, he checked and the baby wasn't breathing. He tried CPR, but it didn't work. He held his child until the ambulance arrived. He lied to them, and to this day, everyone believes it was Sid's. I never told anyone before now. It was heavy, and he was such a nice guy that it kind of messed up my entire outlook on things. I'm a father now too, and thinking about it brings up a lot of conflicting emotions. He tried to off himself a year after I moved out. I figured that living with what he had done was punishment enough. Story 26. When I was in middle school, my best friend went to a different school from me. There was a girl in his class that he had been secretly in love with, had been for years. She was pretty, athletic, and well-liked, while he, like me, was a bookish nerd. In 8th grade, she died in a car accident. Occasionally, our schedules would be different, and I'd have a day off when he had school, so I'd visit his school and pretend to be different made-up characters, basically just using a fake name and saying I was from out of town. So I knew a few people from my friend's school who didn't know that I lived nearby and saw him all the time. After my friend's crush died, one of these people, who had been close with the girl who died, told me that she had to tell me a secret. One she could only tell me because I lived far away and didn't really know anyone involved. She told me that the girl who died had also been secretly in love with my best friend. It's been almost 20 years now. He's still my best friend. He's married, and I've never told him. I never will. Story 27. I got bullied very badly in middle school by a kid. He was the reason for me attempting to take my life. In high school, I came out as gay, and nobody really bullied me after that. I was everyone's favorite homo. The bully and I sat next to each other in history class. He was gone often and would tell people he was skipping. He had these bumps on his arm that were fluid-filled, and he said they were from a four-wheeler accident. I pulled him aside one day and told him I knew he wasn't being truthful. I said, "I know those bumps are from dialysis. I'm here for you. I won't tell anyone else." He broke down and came clean about everything. He needed a kidney and found out in middle school. That's why he picked on me. He didn't know how to deal with it. We're good friends now, but knowing that he was a kid trying to deal with possibly dying was crazy. Story 28. One day in the 7th grade, my friend slipped a note in my locker. It was signed very fancily, and the handwriting was uncharacteristically impeccable. I didn't have time to read it, but in homeroom, I took it out of my binder to read it. The friend who gave me the note must have seen it because he basically tackled people to get to it. I put it back in my binder and refused to give it back until I read it. When I got home that afternoon, I finally pulled out the note so I could read it in peace. Apparently, my friend's extreme social awkwardness ran a bit deeper than I thought it had, and my friend's lack of other very good friends had pushed him to the breaking point. I texted my friend and told him that we could both be awkward together, and really, who needs that many friends? He never replied. 1 year later, he texted me out of the blue. This was also uncharacteristic. He wanted to talk about the note. I had given it back to him the day after I read it and completely forgotten about it in my tumultuous 8th grade year. Apparently, the note was a very subtle goodbye note, and he was going to off himself that night. My text was the only thing that stopped him. He said if I had read it an hour later, he'd be gone. Story 29. I went on a road trip with a few friends, one of whom had only recently returned to our high school after being at another school for a couple of years. Halfway into the trip, when this guy kept freaking out on weed and going quiet, the only guy who knew him well told us that he had to leave his other school because he stabbed a guy to death in a drug-related self-defense incident. The rest of us, still immature and not the most empathetic back then, thought quiet, brooding guy would off us in our sleep. The trip completed all right for everyone, and we never saw him again. He went on to impregnate a girl, then ran out of state, and the last I heard he's in the Marine Corps. Story 30. I have this group of friends that I usually hang out with, but one guy in the group was always kind of creepy and slightly perverted. We didn't like him that much, but we didn't think too much about it. Just over a year ago, he decided to have a party with a bunch of people. Everyone there was good friends, like one huge friendship group. Later into the night, one of the girls found a camera hidden in the bathroom, pointed at the toilet. It was the creepy guy hosting the party. He was kicked out of our group of friends, and most of the school ignored him for the rest of the school year. The worst part is that he's thrown other parties, and we think he may have filmed before. We just never found out. Story 31. An old roommate of mine from university was seriously traumatized by something. He originally told us it had to do with his mandatory military service, but it turned out that something that happened there triggered a memory from his childhood. He had witnessed his friend's death, which really messed him up. He would have severe panic attacks almost daily, which freaked all of us other roommates out. We looked after him as best we could because he was our friend. A few months after this started, something strange happened. He just disappeared one evening and didn't get back until around 4 a.m. He was spouting off about spending the entire evening with his friend, the one who had died. He seemed to have forgotten that his friend had died and was hallucinating him. It turned out he had been wandering around aimlessly, talking to himself for about 7 hours. After we managed to calm him down and try to bring him back to reality, he started saying things like, "He's dead, it wasn't real," and similar statements. This is when things got interesting. He started insisting that his friend was real and that they were wrong. It turns out he had been in therapy as a young teen for another traumatic experience, and the therapist realized he had created a friend for himself to cope. The therapist tried to help him understand this, but he never went back to therapy after that. Story 32. He wasn't my friend, but I was hanging out with a girl I was interested in at the Hotbox Cafe in Kensington Market, Toronto. We were having a really great time and were nice and baked, so we eventually decided to go for some of these godly empanadas that were brought into existence at a small Latin sandwich shop down the road. Anyway, we pop out, sun beating down. We are high as kites, it was glorious. A friend of hers that she apparently hadn't seen in a year waved and came over to us, and we began the small talk of introducing each other and whatnot. He looked a little agitated, but we were stoned and thought nothing of it. Until without even the shadow of a warning, he began his tale. He told us that he broke up with his girlfriend who had been dumped on him by her family for being a nen lover, because she became emotionally abusive, racist, and oddly simultaneously overdependent towards him herself. He then stated that he was on his way to the hospital because the other day he had attempted self-harm, which is difficult in and of itself to process when all you want to hear about is fun in the sun and Star Trek. I then looked at his arms and noticed dozens of cuts as well as a lump of bandaging under his shirt around his gut. At this time, he told us in very minute detail about how he had tried harikari on himself to the point where he had really begun to disembowel himself. He told us at that point, about a third of the way through the process, he realized that this was a very bad idea and proceeded to call 911 while using his other hand to keep his guts from spilling out. We were not prepared for this information. He did say that he was getting help and that the experience was a real eye-opener for him, that in fact he did not wish to die. He left after that just as suddenly as he appeared, and those empanadas didn't sound quite so amazing. Story 33. Not as heavy as some of the other stuff around here, but there was a girl in my high school, called her Liz. Liz was popular and generally seen as nice and approachable and all that. It was our senior year, and that meant senior superlatives were coming up, like class clown, most likely to succeed, etc. Liz began to post amazing, almost photorealistic drawings on her social media accounts, got tons of likes and comments, and garnered a lot of attention around school. She got nominated for Female Class Artist among a couple of my good friends. I was among the artists scene back then, and no one thought twice about it since her art seemed so great. Until one day apparently someone image searched her art and found that it had been stolen from someone else. Not very thoughtfully either, as this artist had tens of thousands of followers on his Instagram. Now the sad thing is that once people went digging into Liz's posts, they found fake FB accounts that only existed to comment on Liz's work. There was one piece that she claimed was a collab with another artist no one around my school knew, and that was another fake account. The best part was at one point she posted an in-process photo collage of her next piece being worked on, and that in its entirety was also stolen from the original artist. Obviously, once word got out, she was taken out of the running and had to wear that little badge of honor for the rest of the year. It made me wonder why someone would go to such lengths just for some momentary recognition. Who even remembers their senior superlative winners more than a week after they graduate? Story 34. My childhood best friend neighbor's mom would pimp her out to men. I'm not sure how I never saw the signs, although I was forbidden to go over to her house by my grandma, so I think she could sense the vibe, or maybe she knew, I don't know. Her mom was single? She never mentioned knowing her father? I don't remember her mom ever working now that I think about it, so I'm not sure how the rent got paid. Well, now I do. I do remember her mom always having guys over for beers and little parties, but they were always outside and my friend always stayed inside the house. Sometimes the men would come over during the day, and I'd be calling my friend outside to come play. There isn't that much space between our houses, and they're old wooden so you can sometimes hear through the walls, and her mom would tell me she was busy or couldn't play right now. It really bothers me how I never saw it, or how if my grandma knew she didn't report it. I don't know how her mom could let men violate her own daughter in exchange for money or booze. I did see some good times between her and her mom. She really loved her mom even though she put her through that. Sorry for the jumbled up rant. I've never talked about it to anyone. I do know she stopped going to my school. I think she got taken away by CPS. I wish she could have confided in me. Maybe I could have done something sooner. Story 35. I dated a girl for about 3 months in the summer, right after graduating high school. My mom was never home and she already lived by herself, so she ended up halfway living with me. She was extremely domestic, cooked, and cleaned the house regularly. At first, this made me uncomfortable because I didn't want to become lazy, but I soon just accepted that it was one of her ways of expressing her love. We were lying in bed, and we got on the topic of our previous homes. I told her I don't really remember the order of houses I lived in well because I moved around a lot and had a non-traditional childhood in that sense. She claimed to have lived in more places than me, but she described her childhood as messed up. I said moving around isn't so bad. She started laughing and said, "No, I could tell you something right now." I stayed silent because the uncomfortable laughter made me uneasy. I was essayed by my stepfather. Her laughter turned to sobbing. Tears were rolling down my face as well. To this day, I remember that moment more vividly than any other. The cold, expressionless look in her eyes, even though laughter was coming from her mouth. I held her and we had a good cry, but not for more than 10 seconds before she apologized for telling me. I think about it sometimes when my mind is restless trying to sleep at night and let out a couple of huge sobs before I get up and do something to take my mind off it. The part that bothers me is if the memory of her telling me these haunts me at night. Imagine what she goes through when she can't sleep. Despite our short-lived relationship, I really want to be there for her if she is going through something. I don't know what to call the feeling, but I want to protect her despite not being in a relationship with her. I wish there was a way I could tell her I'd come get her, give her a place to stay or whatever if she ever needed it without sounding like I'm trying to rekindle the relationship or sounding weird. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.